Hello everybody, this is Bastion Games, and welcome back to Crossout. And today I'm gonna cover why I think that none of all of the new items that were added in the crafting event are gonna be very expensive overall. And I know it's a little bit late here because there's only 3 more days left, but I want to go into why I think they're actually not as good as people think, and I'm gonna do a lot of little comparisons. Even though there's quite a few videos already like this on YouTube, I really wanted to give my own 2 cents on this. So, I'm gonna talk about the Bastion, Photon, Harpy, Arbiter, Pulsar, and the Protector. Of course, all the other items are already existing, well, with the exception of the Rift, which is not a competitive-oriented part, but more of a uh, creativity oriented part, which well, you might end up using it to secure your generator and then be able to disconnect it if you lose a weapon or something, stuff like that. But it's not really going to be relevant to this talk. Curvo is still a really bad weapon, and nothing really will change that unless they really balance it out. Spike has been a really good weapon since pretty much ever, and but it's just simply very very rare because you can only get one piece of it per event per player, and a lot of people don't go for it, and that's why even now there's still 700 coins. That said, they're really high damage per second weapons, and they really rival legendaries and even relics. Oh, anyways, let's get actually into the main topic. Why do I think that none of these weapons are really gonna be worth it? Or, well, cabins and weapons. And we're gonna start with the Bastion, and we're gonna go for to the storage for this, and oop, that's not the one I wanted to do. I wanted to click that button. And of course, the main competitor for the Bastion is gonna be the Humpback. And if you look at the Humpback, it has maximum power, 60 kilometers an hour, and if you compare it to the Bastion, 60 kilometers an hour, and almost maximum power, but just a tiny bit underneath it. And then tonnage and mass, 9,000, 20,000 versus 8,000, 20,000 is also very, very similar. So basically, what the Humpback gains in power is what it loses in tonnage. And because you have to make up in the tonnage with extra wheels, you're going to lose that extra power. So they're pretty much going to be equal in speed in that regard. Both have 11 energy, and with the durability and mass, you're at almost 500 health and 4.5 thousand kilograms versus 470 health and 4,000 kilograms. So the Humpback is a little bit lighter, which ends up with you being able to get a slightly heavier vehicle which might be relevant on things like very large Goliath builds. Just saying, and still have it with more armor since the actual effective maximum mass is going to be 16,000 on the Humpback. Well, it's going to be 15,500 on the Bastion. But of course, the thing that people want the Bastion for is going to be that front plow. And after testing, uh, stuff like penetrating weapons, let's say Scorpion or Executioner, do not penetrate this front plow, and stuff like that. It just reduces the damage of any incoming projectiles by 50%. However, even though this might make you way more durable in terms of cabin health, it does not protect your guns. And you kind of hide your guns, I guess, but if your guns are shot off, it doesn't matter how much health you have, because it will not matter, because you are not to be able to shoot back or damage any enemies. Now, if this plow was able to ram people for bonus damage, similar to how a tusk works, uh, maybe then we'll be talking, but or impact damage resistance, it has none of those. It only has the 50% damage reduction to all damage type except energy damage. But it says like that, but it doesn't have a very good impact resistance. You do still take impact damage as normal, but like even though it's reduced, you still take a lot of impact damage. And people argue that this health reduction is something really good, but with the amount of health you can put on a Humpback, even then, and even with mammoths, you generally lose your guns before you lose your entire vehicle. And because of this, I really don't think that it's actually gonna matter that much. While at the same time, a humpback, when you're getting shot at, you can get up to 25% bonus damage. And the bonus damage, 25% is a really high amount, guys. Don't underestimate the power output that a humpback can have after 2000 damage. And it will continue taking damage because people will keep shooting at it, and you're a heavy build, and you already have pretty good survivability, and because of that, you just have a higher damage output. And I generally think that, there, of course, there will be edge case scenarios where the plow will matter on the Bastion. You're generally better off with the 25% damage increase from the humpback. And now, if we actually look at the prices, the humpback is at just under 350, and this Bastion is still almost 500. So sure, you can craft and sell it, because crafting the Bastion and selling it and then sell and buying a humpback basically would be cheaper than actually crafting the humpback. But other than that, for now at least, I don't really think you should be focusing around getting a Bastion, since the humpback will generally outperform it at higher tiers. And then on to the next cabin, it's going to be, of course, the Photon. And the Photon's main competitor, funny enough, is actually the Quantum. And I do want to point out that all of these cabins, if everything goes as the last events, will at some point become craftable like normal. But the Quantum and Photon are in a way similar, yet worlds apart. So first we're going to go over the actual output of the cabins in terms of power, tonnage, and mass. So Photon has all power except for 3.5 bars, and the Quantum has misses 5 bars, so it only has 50%, and this thing has, I think, 65% basically in terms of power output. So there's a considerably higher power, which does help. And the speed of the Quantum is 90 kilometers an hour versus 80 on the Photon, which basically translates into Photon being a heavier, sturdier cabin, actually more akin to a steppe spider of some sorts, but a little bit in between there. It comes with 13,000 mass limit, 5,000 tonnage, and in that way it has the same tonnage as the Quantum, but lacks 3,000 mass limit. Its energy output is both the same, and with 260 health versus 335, of course the Photon has a lot more health, but the 2000 kilograms of the Photon is again much heavier than the Quantum. So with the Quantum you only get 9,400 effective mass. With the Photon you get 11,000 effective mass, only actually making a difference of around 1,500. Which again is a little bit smaller than other things. But the main thing that was a detraction of people for the Photon was the 100% or 130% damage to heated parts. But this is actually kind of a misnomer. It's not really how it works. Like it is not additional damage; it's just 130% damage. So energy weapons, of course, the normal damage would be 100%, and you will do double damage against a fully heated part. But if you instead of dealing 100 damage, if the part is fully heated plus at 100%, you get 30% extra, and doubling that is up to 60% health, 60% extra damage. And even though 60% damage is an absolute shit ton compared to the Quantum's only 20% damage increase, of course, by the Quantum, with the Quantum, you actually have to not receive damage for 10 full seconds, which is actually pretty hard, since even just a stray shot from a machine gun will actually reset your perk. And in that way, I actually think that they should rework the Quantum's perk, but that's another story, so for another time. And we're going to go back to the Photon. So from 20% to 60% damage. And a lot of people are jumping on the Photon wagon, saying that that means that we get a very large increase in the damage output of our Auroras. However, people seem to be forgetting that the Aurora isn't a very popular weapon because it has a very low damage output. Look at that 1 bar of damage. It, even I don't really have the raw stats of this thing up, but I actually saw it and it was like really low damage. And compared even to like guns that have a very small damage bridge, such as Equalizer, Shorts, and Hornets, like it still gets outperformed quite a bit. And even with the perk, you do get outdamaged. Of course, the Aurora has a lot of accuracy, but that's actually where we get into the second issue. If you want to use any other energy weapon than the Aurora, you are gonna have a very hard time with actually heating specifically heated up parts. If you have your own Aurora or your own Incinerator or Mandrake even, or Porcupine, flamethrowers, really just any weapon that heats up, you're gonna have to hit the same part with all your guns to actually get the damage out of it. And generally, that's going to be a large cabin, such as the Humpback or the Bastion, Jawbreaker, stuff like that. Are pretty easy to hit. But even if you just go down to a Torero or Favorite, it's actually going to start getting harder and harder to actually hit the same part. And especially if we're talking about degunning specific machine guns or other smaller weapons, it's pretty much impossible to hit with just a photon. And because of that, the perk actually very rarely gets into effect. And because of that, generally you're gonna be using the Torero or Favorite to a better effect than the Photon. With the same thing with the Quantum, you generally cannot really activate the perk. So um, the the amount of times that you can actually make use of the Photon's perk with a normal energy weapon is tiny. And at that point, you might actually just want to look into different cabins because there are simply some of them that have a better use. Simply, for example, if you use a Quasar or something like that, you can use the Echo for the increased reload rate, which actually ends up in giving you a higher damage output. Or maybe use the Harpy because you want to have the extra ammo. Stuff like that are generally more effective than the Photon. But there is actually one big argument for the photon that can be made, which I actually have not tested yet, but I do plan on testing at some point in the future, is the photon in team play. If you have an ally that it's Clan Wars, that runs porcupines, for example, uh, porcupines are already really good weapons. You do sodium in Clan Wars, and they heat up enemies. If you have allies like that, and then you grab a Helios photon, then we're talking. Like, the photon isn't really meant to be used as a single user cabin because using both the heat generating weapons and the payoff weapons isn't really doable. You really need to have two different builds, and then one with the photon and the other ones with, again, just the porcupines, because really they're really just the most effective heat generating weapons. And then you can really make use of that perk. So you would generally be talking about a photon hover and a large porcupine spider, and then your team would probably exist out of two photon hovers and two spiders, and maybe have a typhoon spider and then a porcupine spider. And then yeah, sure, then you can do a lot of damage with photon, but it's not really meant for single player use. So you do really need to have a friend that has good heat weapons because otherwise the photon is not gonna be worth it. And that's it. We're gonna go on to our last cabin with the Harpy. And the Harpy's direct competitor, I think, is actually the Torero. Torero has 5 out of 10 power, 100 kilometers an hour. Harpy has 5 out of 10 power, 100 kilometers an hour, so they're equal. 4.5 thousand kilograms, 8.5 thousand mass limit, 5.5 thousand kilograms, and 10,000 mass limit. So the Torero does have an edge in mass limit, and also its mass is lower than the Harpy at 750 versus 1000, and 295 health versus 310 also makes the Torero tougher. This generally means that in terms if you disregard the perk, the Torero is going to be outperforming the Harpy. And on top of that, the Torero has 1500 power score versus the Harpy's 1800 power score. Of course, I am comparing your Harpy now to one of the best cabins in the game with the Torero. still being very, very expensive compared to the Harpy's price of only 550. And I do have to say, the Harpy will outperform the Werewolf and the Cerberus, but it will never, ever really outperform the Torero. Because the Rock Cap instead of the Torero are simply better. And the perk, even though people might actually not think it's going to be relevant, are actually really similar in a way. So the projectile explosion radius gets increased by 20%. Now I have to say that even the largest weapons, like in terms of explosion radius, don't really have an explosion radius larger than 4 or 5 blocks. So increasing that by 25%, by 20% is increasing that size by up to 1 block. So for comparison, then if we have a basically this is going to be the difference in explosion radius. And the chance that you actually hit something important in that tiny increased explosion radius is actually smaller than you might think. Because if you actually hit accurately to begin with, you are hitting the part that you want to hit. And in that case, it will be not relevant at all whether you have the improved explosion radius or not. But with weapons that are not fully accurate, the Torero, of course, gives you an increased accuracy, and that increased accuracy does stack with the, I think it is Jade's accuracy. Yeah, here it is. Actual move increase by 15%. Those two perks stack on top of each other. So that with the Torero, you can get up to 35% increased accuracy, and that makes weapons like the Cricket really accurate. People argue like, okay, but if I hit people with the Harpy, I will do more damage because at range I cannot really aim anymore. But at that range, you will generally miss one or two rockets with the Harpy that you would not miss with the Torero. And the increased damage output because of the large exposure radius is negated by the reduced amount of rockets hit. Then the other thing that's left is gonna be the ammo increase. And the ammo increase only works if you have at least one ammo pack on your build, because it increases the effectiveness of your ammo or microfactory modules. So this does also increase the effectiveness of a Genesis drone carrier, and it will generally give you one or two extra drones per. Actually, I think it gives you two drones instead of one with the Genesis, and I will actually just quickly check that to make sure. So with the Harpy and a standard drone, you will have 4 uses. And then adding a single Genesis should actually make it a up to 6 now. Yep, it does. And then adding a second one makes the effectiveness 8. And it actually works per module, so Genesis and per ammo pack. It does not round up or down across all of the ammo packs you're using. And because most of the ammo packs because you will end up by having like 6.5 ammo, and it will always round up to 7 ammo then, which makes it really convenient to make your build more compact, because you have to carry less ammo, and it will also make your build a little bit more safe because you will not have as many, again, explosive parts that can actually blow up in your face. And that is where the Harpy actually shines. It has an awkward building size, and for the higher tier vehicles, especially on hovers, it's really weird to build with this thing if you want to build sideways. But it can make for a pretty compact build, and I just think that until we really see that compactness come to fruition, you're generally better off using the Torero. Also because the Torero is actually more compact than the Harpy, because the space you save by using the Torero, you can use that space to again then put the ammo in that space. And I just don't see the Harpy just being that special overall. I do have to actually point out with the Photon, It actually has a really convenient back slot here that you can use to store ammo if you are using stuff like the Quasar, which makes it more interesting in that aspect. But mm, all of these cabins, again, are just not gonna be competitive enough. They're good, sure, and if you can get them and you think they're cool, sure, get them. But if you're actually looking at staying competitive, these cabins are not gonna be at the competitive scene, most likely. Maybe we'll see a Photon, but very, very unlikely. Also, fun fact about the Photon, it actually uses a camera as screen. It doesn't actually have a windshield. And this is actually just an armor plate. It's actually not a windscreen screen because it actually gets painted over. And it's actually just really weird, actually. But anyway, on to the Arbiter minigun. And I already made a few videos about the Arbiter minigun. And just long story short, it doesn't have enough health to really make use of the perk because by the time you're heated up with the perk, your guns are already gone. And it's the same issue as with the equalizer, but the payoff is larger, sure, with this gun actually having one of the highest DPS per energy values in the game. But that payoff doesn't really matter if you can never reach that payoff. And because of that, until these miniguns get a health increase, they simply cannot be meta because the meta is and has always been degunning first. And even mammoths can get degunned really quickly in this game. So having over 1000 health being degunned really quickly, well, talk about only 170. They're gone if you just sneeze at them. And that's just the biggest problem with this gun. If you can make this gun hidden enough that it cannot easily be shot off, then you might actually get some decent results. But again, you have to get in a lot of hoops, and you cannot really make a use of these standard build techniques to actually hide it because it will not be enough. And again, you're just gonna get degunned with this gun. And that's really all I got on the Arbiter. And we're gonna go on to the Pulsar. And the Pulsar is actually a very interesting gun, as in it cannot be used with its epic counterpart very easily. With the Arbiter, it's just a longer spin up, higher damage equalizer of some sorts. The Pulsar has a different velocity than the Quasar. So those guns cannot, if you are leading your shots, you have to lead differently for the two different guns, which makes it very hard to use both of them on a single build. So you generally have to get two pulsars, and you cannot use or two quasars. And other than that, it's just a slightly improved quasar. And the annoying thing about the quasar is actually it has no perk. Launches a projectile straight ahead and has no recoil. The Pulsar also doesn't have recoil. Really not to speak of. I'm actually gonna have to check that now because I'm now not sure anymore whether it actually does not have recoil or it actually does. So we're actually gonna put it on here to actually show you guys whether or not it has recoil. And nope, it does not have recoil. So I'm gonna lock my gun to actually, yep, no recoil. And because it doesn't have recoil, the Quasar, like the fact that it got a perk over the Quasar, it's kind of annoying. I think the Quasar should get its own perk, but the Pulsar's perk is going to be for every 100 meters passed by the projectile's exposure radius increases by 0.25 meters, and this is actually a hard limit. If you hit people by 99 meters, you do not get the perk. It's really just 100, 200, 300 onwards. And so you actually have to get used to those ranges, and that's going to be really, really unnatural as well. And even at 100 meters, it actually starts getting kind of difficult for Pulsar to hit fast-moving targets. And beyond 200 meters, don't really bother shooting because you're not gonna be able to hit people because they can literally stop, back up, and not be hit if you're actually leading the entire shot. But if they see them and they're braking, then okay, then you can get a shot in because you will not be able to accelerate fast enough. But especially hovers are not gonna be targets you really hit with the pulsar. So the park is just like with the other short distance generating weapons like the cricket and the ratchet. It has a very counterintuitive perk to it, which will make you try to use it long range. And of course, people say Pulsar plus Harpy to make it even better, but 20% increase of 0.25 meters. So to clarify, 0.25 meters is again one block. So 20% of that one block increase is only like 1/5 of an additional block. And Pulsar's explosion radius by default is actually rather small. And it's actually really underwhelming to compare to the cannons. So even with Harpy, you get a equal explosion radius at around 100 meters, like with Pulsar and Harpy, as with a normal cannon. So it's not really worth it in that aspect. And its weight is also really heavy compared to its durability, which also makes it like again also with its size as well, makes it a pretty easy target to shoot off. Like compared to a mammoth, which has 1100 health, almost 1200 health. This one only has 850, and it isn't that much smaller. Like people will actually say like, oh, but it's not that big, but it will surprise you. Like if you look at the hitbox here and compare that to the hitbox of a mammoth, you can actually see that the mammoth can be put 2 blocks closer, and it can actually be put a full block closer to the cabin than the Pulsar. So the Pulsar's actual barrel built hitbox, is actually this large. And yeah, I don't really get why I did this because it's just such a huge thing. And actually, if you put a block right here, you should be able to like have the barrel go over it or something. But no, they didn't allow us to really do that. And you can see it as well with the build limit. You can see it here actually cuts off that block, and with the mammoth, it cuts off up to here. And this one is really clean because you can build all the way up here, and that's no problem at all. But with the pulsar, it doesn't allow you to do that. So you're gonna have a really hard time building around a gun just to begin with. So like you're not even into a battle, you're still in the garage. Like you're gonna have a hard time building with this thing. And that hitbox even translates into battle because you can see here, this is where the hitbox starts. It has a really buggy hitbox because if you actually like shoot near this gun, you actually hit it. You cannot really graze it. So I can actually try if I can maybe graze it in a actual test drive here. But it's gonna be pretty hard to simulate. So we're just gonna try it really quickly here. And we're gonna see what happens if we just shoot just past the gun. You can see right here, it actually does hit the gun. And there's no reason why I should be hitting the gun right there. Because I'm clearly shooting in the air right now. But no, you're just gonna be subtracting health from the pulsar. And just because of its huge ass hitbox, you cannot really do anything to evade shots with and hits, and you will get degunned really quickly with this gun. And that's it. If you think that the uh, Pulsar is good, just think about the Quasar. Quasar is not a good gun. Even improvement of a bad gun will not be good. It's not a very large improvement. You get a slightly higher damage output, like half a bar here according to the stat card, and if you look to the already existing amount of damage, it is very small. And yeah, that said, we're gonna go on to the last gun, the Protector. So the Protector's direct competitor is of course the Tackler. Tackler 205 health versus 185 with a Protector, giving the Tackler a higher health. And by the start, and 3 energy versus 3 energy is the same, and the mass is almost the same with only 10 kilograms difference in favor of the Protector. The actual damage output is similar, and I can actually show you guys right now, live, to show you guys the damage difference between the Tackler and the Protector. So this is gonna be the Protector, and a single shot of a Protector does 4 damage right here. Actually 9 damage. I'm sorry, and 8 damage of the Tackler here means that, okay, you have a slight edge in damage, but in terms of if you want to hide these guns, the Protector has a 4x2 profile, and the Tackler has a 3x2 profile. The actual depth here matters actually very little, because as a matter of fact, you can actually in terms of hiding, you can kind of hide this gun like this, but will be very limiting on your firing angles. Well, with the Tackler, you can actually like put a small bar right here without really limiting your firing angles that much. As you guys can see, very small decrease in firing angle. Well, with here you can only fire up to there. Well, I guess they have similar firing angles this way, but because of this, if you want to, for example, put these guns under your cabin and shoot from underneath, the Tackler is actually a better choice because you can get more guns in the spot where you can actually get Protector. You can generally put in 4 Tacklers or 3 Protectors. And with the Protector, you have to find the spot for the 4th gun somewhere else, which again will cause problems with building. So okay, yeah, you get increased damage, and if you put the Protector is an improvement on the Defender. Um, in terms of raw stats, the Tackler still slightly wins out. Also, funny thing, if you look at the build menu, you can see this one has a little icon on the top right, where you can see that's a Night Rider's event item compared to the Tackler. But let's go into the actual perk now. So the Tackler has damage resistance when it's not firing. So when you're cooling down, etc., etc., you actually get a damage resistance bonus. And of course, it has the higher health between the two. It has 20 health increased overall. While with the Protector, you can get up to 20 health as long as you are firing within half a second, roughly, after another. And you have to, of course, hit the shots to make use of the perk. And with the 20% increased like resistance, that means that is 18.5 times 2 gets to 37 health. So with 37 health, it has a health pool of around 15 higher than the Tackler. But that's only when you're always hitting your shots accurately, which is generally not gonna happen. So effectively speaking, not accounting the Tackler's perk, uh, with the Protector, you're gonna be the both guns are gonna last about as long, but again, the Protector has a larger surface to shoot at frontally, so they're easier to hit, which in another way results in a decreased health. Um, if you're putting them vertically behind the cabin, you can actually uh, alleviate this issue a little bit. You actually have to put them all the way back here because they aren't like the Defenders. As you guys can see here, the Defender can be put 1 block forward because the barrel is in fact higher than the one of the Protector. And with the Protector, you cannot really fire properly. You have to fire upwards, so you really have to use large tires in the back and small in the front to get this effect working. And at the same time, you can actually do this with a Tackler just a bit better. Of course, with a Tackler, you will have a 4 block space left, and otherwise you would have a 4 block space left with the Protector as well. But with the Protector, you cannot really do this properly, as shown right here. And in that way, you can only really block off these sides. And of course, then you would have a 4 by like a 2 by 2 area, just like the Tackler has. But the Tackler's hitbox will be better than the one of the Protector at that scenario. And just in that way, the Tackler remains better than the Protector is. I just wish that the Protector's barrel was just as high as the Defender's, because then we would be talking differently. Because then you could actually stacking the guns in a manner like this, and I'm gonna show you guys it this way. If you stack them like that, you can. That's how you generally do it with Defenders. But with this gun, it is not nearly as effective, even if you use something like Bigfoot's all the way in the rear. And we're gonna, just for good measure, take out these. So it tilts forward quite a bit. And okay, I guess we can shoot kind of forward, but even now it randomly blocks off from time to time. And you can see, because the recoil on the suspension, that's actually what's causing that. But it just makes it almost impossible because to actually make use of your perk a lot. So actually, let's actually try to actually get the perk working, and you can see how quickly it deactivates because I can actually not fire down far enough. I can only fire really small bursts with this build. And again, this is not really a very useful build because you're gonna only use very few wheels to actually get your gun depression. So this is not gonna be the way that protectors are gonna be used. While at the same time, defenders were actually pretty effective in this setup because you could simply put them like this, and you would have a much easier time to actually fire down here. And actually, with the more forward-facing of these, I think you can actually, yeah, you can put the defender up top again, one further forward, and you can pretty much fire at any given time, and we not have any recoil issues there either. Okay, now because the gun are locking, of course you can see that happening, but again, these guns are really hurt by small details that are overlooked. The Protector's gun height is going to be one of the biggest examples of small details that can really screw a gun up. And I don't really have anything else to add here, guys. I don't, and I do want to clarify that I do not want to seem like I am hating on all the new parts, because I do think that it is really cool that there is now a much cheaper alternative to the Tackler, because of course the Tackler is kind of expensive, although right now, of course, the Protector is more expensive than the Tackler. There are a few reasons for that. Is of course, Night Rider's event is still ongoing. It's new, that's why it's going to be expensive. But once it gets craftable, it will get cheaper. But right now, you don't really need it, because I have to say, when I looked at the Tackler's price, I was actually surprised it was this cheap. And that's probably because it got nerfed a few times recently. Well, recently, quite a while back already, but because of those nerfs, they got pretty cheap. And I actually feel like the Tackler will be more cheaper overall than the Protector for at least quite a while. Um, Maybe once the Protector really is craftable and the the pack is no longer obtainable. I think no, it's no longer obtainable of the Tackler, but it hasn't been going up in price much lately. And because of this, Tackler right now is a more excessive gun than the Protector, and it is still just better in pretty much every way than the Protector. Because the increased size of the Protector negates its 15 health increase, basically, if you are on the perk. If you are not on the perk, of course, the Tackler has a better damage resistance. And if you're not shooting, the Tackler gets an additional bonus of health, which means that if you're not shooting, the attacker will probably have equal or more health than the perked up protector. Again, I don't really want to seem hating on these new stuff and kind of really starting over again here. But I just want to have you guys be cautious about what you grind for. Because of course, this is a grindy game, and if you buy and sell even just a single epic of 300 coins, that is still almost a full rare in terms of price, because you lose 10% of it if you, well, quick buy, quick sell. And at 10%, that's still about a day's worth of grind if you're like 2 hours grinding a day. And it hurts quite a bit. It really hurts quite a bit for everyone. And even though I'm a promotional account user, I know how painful it is to lose money in this game. Because of course I have been playing this game for a very long time, also without promotional account back in the day. So I do think about you when I see new stuff. That's really what I wanted to say here, guys. And yeah, that's that. If you guys got any arguments to why these are good after all, or even why they're even worse than I'm already making them seem like that right now. Because again, I don't want to. I'm not saying they're actually trash. I'm just saying there are still better alternatives already existing than these ones right now. But yeah, just comment down below what you guys think about these new parts. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye guys.